The grand Belmont estate stood as a symbol of power and wealth, its towering gates opening to a world of luxury only a select few could ever experience. Inside, under the glow of golden chandeliers, the air was thick with laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the quiet hum of privilege. This was the world of Lucas Belmont, young, handsome, and heir to a real estate empire that ensured he never heard the word no. He had everything: money, status, and a circle of friends just as entitled as he was. And tonight, he wanted entertainment. Seated in a plush lounge with his friends, Lucas swirled the bourbon in his glass, a lazy smirk playing on his lips. The topic of conversation had shifted to the upcoming Belmont Foundation Gala, an event where the wealthiest of the elite gathered to flaunt their riches and social standing. But Lucas wasn't interested in another predictable night of forced smiles and dull conversations. He wanted to make this year's gala unforgettable. That's when his gaze landed on Elena Vasquez, the quiet maid dusting the shelves in the corner of the room. Elena had worked at the Belmont estate for over a year, slipping through the halls unnoticed, always keeping her head down. She had learned the rules of this world: speak only when spoken to, stay invisible, and never, ever forget her place. But despite how carefully she navigated her job, she could always feel their eyes on her. The whispered jokes, the smirks, the unspoken reminder that she didn't belong. Lucas leaned forward, his smirk widening. "I've got an idea," he announced, his voice dripping with amusement. "I'm taking Elena to the gala, as my date." Laughter erupted around the room. "You can't be serious," one of his friends scoffed, nearly spilling his drink. "Oh, I'm dead serious," Lucas chuckled. "Imagine their faces when I walk in with a maid on my arm," another friend grinned. "But what if she refuses?" Lucas took a slow sip of his drink, his confidence unwavering. "She won't. She works for me. She doesn't get a choice." That night, as Elena was finishing up her shift, Lucas approached her. His presence alone made her grip the cleaning rag tighter. "Elena," he said smoothly, "I have an invitation for you." She hesitated. "An invitation?" "To the Belmont Gala, as my guest." Her stomach twisted. She knew this wasn't kindness. This was a joke, a cruel game meant to amuse him and his friends. But she also knew what refusing would mean. So, with a stiff nod, she whispered, "Fine." The night of the gala arrived, and Elena stood frozen at the entrance of the grand hall, her heart pounding. The moment she stepped inside, all eyes turned to her. The whispers began instantly. "Who is that? Wait, isn't she the maid?" Lucas leaned down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Enjoying yourself?" And in that moment, Elena knew. This wasn't just a gala, it was a stage, and she was their entertainment. Elena forced herself to take a step forward, then another, even as the weight of their stares threatened to crush her. The room was alive with murmurs, hushed voices barely hiding their amusement. Some guests exchanged knowing smirks, while others looked downright offended. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't one of them. Lucas, walking beside her, reveled in the attention. His grip was light on her arm, his posture relaxed, as if this were all just a grand performance for his own amusement. He led her through the glittering ballroom, stopping here and there to greet guests who struggled to mask their surprise. "Elena, darling," a woman in an emerald gown purred, her lips barely holding back a smirk. "I had no idea you had such fine taste, Lucas," Lucas chuckled. "I like to keep things interesting." Elena swallowed hard. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the marble floors and escape the spectacle, but she couldn't. She was trapped in this game, forced to play along while they laughed at her expense. The night dragged on, a blur of forced smiles and whispered insults disguised as pleasantries. Lucas introduced her to people who barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like an amusing novelty rather than an actual person. Every glance, every comment was a reminder that she was nothing more than the entertainment for the evening. Then came the moment that changed everything. Voice echoed through the grand hall, drawing attention to the stage at the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special opportunity tonight," the announcer declared. "An open stage for anyone brave enough to entertain us." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of intrigue and amusement. Then a voice from Lucas's group spoke up. "What about Elena?" Elena's stomach twisted. A few guests laughed. "Yes," another voice chimed in, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Let's see what the maid can do." Before she could react, hands guided her forward, pushing her toward the stage. Panic rose in her throat. She wanted to refuse, to run, but the room had already decided. Lucas, watching from the sidelines, smirked. "Go on, Elena. Show them what you've got." It was meant to be the final act of humiliation. The moment where she would stammer, freeze, and give them exactly what they wanted, a laugh at her expense. But as Elena stepped onto the stage, something inside her shifted. The humiliation, the whispers, the years of being overlooked and dismissed, it all built up into something else. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The first note cut through the noise, silencing the laughter instantly. Her voice, rich and haunting, filled the ballroom like a force of nature. The melody carried something raw, something real, a depth of emotion that none of them had expected. The people who had mocked her only moments ago were now frozen, their expressions changing from amusement to awe. Lucas's smirk faded. His friends, who had been so eager to see her fail, now watched with wide eyes. And as she reached the final note, a stunned silence hung over the room. Then, one by one, they rose to their feet. Applause. Loud, thunderous, overwhelming. Elena stood there, breathless, taking it all in. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't a joke. She was unforgettable. Elena stood frozen on the stage, her chest rising and falling as the sound of applause crashed over her like a wave. It didn't feel real. Just moments ago, they had laughed at her, treating her like she was nothing. Now, they were on their feet, clapping, cheering, their eyes shining with something she had never expected. Admiration. She scanned the room, taking in the sea of stunned faces. Some guests wiped at their eyes, clearly moved by the emotion in her voice. Others simply stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. And then there was Lucas. He hadn't moved. His smirk was gone, his usual arrogance replaced with something else. He looked lost, like he had just realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Before Elena could process it all, a woman in an elegant gown pushed forward through the crowd. "Who trained you?" she asked, her voice breathless with excitement. Elena blinked, still trying to find her voice. "No one." The woman's eyes gleamed. "Incredible. I'm Madame Winslow. I run the Winslow Conservatory of Music. A voice like yours belongs on the world's biggest stages." She smiled warmly. "I'd like to offer you a full scholarship." Elena's breath hitched. Was this really happening? She had spent years scrubbing floors, keeping her head down, believing that her dreams were long gone. And now, in the place where she had been humiliated, she was being given a chance to escape it all. Before she could respond, another voice cut in. "And I will personally fund her training." The room turned as Richard Belmont, Lucas's father, stepped forward. His presence alone commanded attention, his expression unreadable. Lucas stiffened. "Father, you can't be serious." Richard barely glanced at him. "I know talent when I see it, son, and I don't waste potential." Elena's heart pounded. Everything was changing too fast, and for the first time in a long time, it was changing in her favor. She turned to Madame Winslow, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside. "I accept." A new wave of applause filled the room, but Elena barely heard it. Her eyes flicked to Lucas, who was still watching her with something unreadable in his gaze. Regret? Shock? Maybe both. Later that night, as the gala wound down, she found herself standing by the grand staircase, lost in thought. She had come here expecting humiliation, and instead, she had been given a future she never thought possible. Elena. She turned to find Lucas behind her. He hesitated, his usual confidence gone. "I never expected this." She met his gaze. Her voice, calm. "You never expected that I had worth." His jaw tightened. "I was a fool." "Yes," she agreed simply. Silence stretched between them. Then, he exhaled, his voice quieter. I'm sorry. Elena studied him for a moment. A part of her had once sought his approval, longed for him to see her as more than just a joke. But she didn't need that anymore. She didn't need his guilt or his apology to validate who she was. I don't need your guilt, Lucas, she said. I don't need your validation. I know who I am now. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, alone. For the first time in his life, Lucas Belmont felt small. Months later, the Grand Metropolitan Opera House erupted in applause. Elena Vasquez, once the forgotten maid, now a star, stood beneath the dazzling lights, soaking in the moment. She had made it. She had risen above them all. And in the shadows, unseen by the world, Lucas watched. He had once controlled her fate, but now she was untouchable. And he knew. He would never forget the night he lost her, because it was the night she found herself.